Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football is brought to you by your local Anheuser-Busch distributors. Ray Eldridge Jewelry, elegance without the attitude. Peoria and Decatur. Physician's Choice Wellness. Give your weight away today. And Buffalo Wild Wings. Mattoon, Champaign, Savoy.
Welcome to another edition of Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football, the show that each week will take you inside the practices, the games, and the interview rooms as we get ready for the next Fighting Illini football game. I'm Matt Loveless, coming to you from Buffalo Wild Wings in Savoy, as we do every week for the football show for Illinois football fans. We'll talk about last week's game against Penn State, and we'll break that down. We'll also talk about the upcoming game against Wisconsin, and of course, as usual, we've compiled some of the best minds in Illinois football coverage. We have Steve Kelly, Brian Barnhart, and Bob Osmussen standing by. And without further ado, we'll head to the round table for some of the big topics in college football. Guys.
All right, thanks, Matt. Steve Kelly, Brian Barnhart, Bob Osmussen talking it over college football. One thing I noticed last week, when you look around the country, guys, some of the scores, that one game that you picked, the Baylor West Virginia game, looked like a basketball score. I had to check to see if it went into overtime. It did not, but a lot of offense out there in college football.
Yeah, we thought the Illinois game a few years ago with Michigan, 67-65, triple overtime, was just an unbelievable game. We never seen anything like it. And just the way that the offenses are going now with this hurry up, not just the spread, but the hurry up, quick as a cat tempo that West Virginia and Baylor basically put on display for the whole country.
Nice to see West Virginia's assimilated into the Big 12, where apparently defense is kind of at a premium. They just don't want to play it a whole lot. But it infected the SEC, which is known for defense. Yeah, the Georgia game went nuts, high scoring. So it's across the country, and except maybe in the Big Ten. We had 17-14 or 17-16 Michigan State, Ohio State. So it's not getting the Big Ten, and maybe that's a problem for the Big Ten.
And the story of the Big Ten last week, I think, was that game in Lincoln, Nebraska, the Wisconsin-Nebraska game. That was kind of high scoring, 30-27. But that was really an outstanding football game.
Really was. I kind of gave up on it after a while because Wisconsin had been so dominant. Nebraska was making turnovers. Wisconsin marching in with those old style uniforms, the throwback jerseys, which was kind of a cool look. Don't know if I'd want to see that every week, but that was interesting. And then just Taylor Martinez just took over, and the game went to Nebraska.
My wife hated those uniforms.
I got a question for you. If you tuned that in, there were no graphics and nothing on the screen, and you just saw those two teams playing, could you identify them?
Probably not.
It'd take you a little while.
Probably not. It would take a while. That's right.
Well, if you put it in a black and white screen, you'd think you were 1950 or something like that, because that was the throwback look.
Something else, obviously, we'll be talking about as we move through the show is Illinois' performance against Penn State, or lack thereof, however you want to look at it. But another tough game defensively for the Illini.
Yeah, a lot of points, which I think it was, coming into this year for Illini fans, they're thinking, hey, our offense hopefully will be better than it was at the end of last year. We know the defense is pretty good, but as it turns out, the offense has continued to struggle, and the defense has not been where it was a year ago.
Important players like Jonathan Brown, where's he been? He was hurt, apparently, in the second half, but that's very difficult.
Not sure if we're going to see Jonathan Brown today or not. He did practice midweek, so that's usually a good sign, but he was a little dinged up to coach, to quote Tim Banks after the ball game, and he said midweek that we'll have to wait and see. It could be a game decision on him, but they could sure use him.
Well, they could, and in spite of that, a couple of young linebackers, Sevtina for one, and then, of course, Mason Monheim, the freshman of the week in the Big Ten. That kind of bodes well for the future. I think we're going to see, like a Jay Lehman, like a Britt Miller, a young man that maybe somebody overlooked, or I think he was a player out of the state of Ohio that maybe a three-star that people didn't focus on necessarily, become a leader of the team eventually. We'll see what happens.
And the Big Ten took notice, honoring him for the week.
We'll talk more about that, more Illinois football, more Big Ten football ahead. Right now, back to you, Matt.
Hey, thank you, Steve. Coming up next, it's kind of like a Band-Aid. You just got to rip it off. So we'll talk about Penn State. We'll get it out of the way, the issues the Illini need to address following that 35-7 loss. That's next on Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football. All right, welcome back to Inside the Illini Big Ten College Football. Now, there was plenty of build-up to this Illinois-Penn State game. The first Big Ten game, of course. A couple of teams hoping to resurrect their season, start fresh. And, of course, one big off-season wound to heal for the Nittany Lions. Our Central Illinois Buick dealers give us our look in the rear view.
There was a week's worth of build-up in Happy Valley. The Nittany Lions, their fans, and their media all still stewing about the offseason. No, not about the story most everyone remembers, the Illini accepted the transfer of a Penn State player in August. They were the only conference team to do so, and to say Penn State felt betrayed would be an understatement.
I regret that it ended up being this much and is still talked about, but it did give a young man the opportunity to make his decision on what he wanted to do.
Whether Penn State came out with a chip on their shoulders or they're a team rediscovering their talent, the Illini were immediately overmatched, fumbling their first punt return, turnover, before they ever had an offensive possession.
It just happened, and we've got to respond to that.
On the drive, the Nittany Lions had to go just 26 yards. Zach Swinak finishing it off with a 1-yard touchdown run. PSU added another before we hit the second quarter, and in that period, Penn State QB Matt McGloin over the middle to Matt Lehman, a 21-yard strike, and adding insult to injury. A helmet-to-helmet hit by Ernest Thomas III. He was ejected. The Illini penalized.
That's something that we can't do. In protection of our student athletes, they're going to look at those things and make those decisions and make those calls.
Second half, very little working for the Illinois offense, so Coach Beckman pulling one out of his bag of tricks. The lateral to Josh Ferguson, and the running back tossing a 22-yard touchdown to Spencer Harris. It was 21-7 with a momentum swing.
Anytime you don't play quarterback and you can throw a touchdown pass, of course he's fired up about that.
But the thing about momentum, you need to keep it going. The Illini didn't. Penn State marched down the field and ate up time for 2 more scores. The first, this Matt McGloin rushing score, and the Nittany Lions handed the Illini another crushing defeat, 35-7 the final.
Not to be able to get it done, was extremely disappointing.
They just knew we just came up short on a few series, and you just can't have that.
Another concerning performance from the defense, but the thing that may have bugged coaches the most, the offense was in the Penn State red zone 3 times, and of those 3 trips, they got 0 points.
Our football team is hurting, and as we spoke to them in the locker room, it's time to step up, see what you're all about, see what this football team's all about, and move forward. We've got to.
Well, the Illini come up short to Penn State, of course, 35-7 the final score. And I think, guys, when this game appeared on the schedule, after all that happened with Joe Paterno and all the turmoil, that you thought, okay, here's a winnable game for Illinois. It's at home, start of the Big Ten season. And we talked about the defense struggling and the offense trying to get it going, but it was special teams in that first quarter that really proved fatal to Illinois' chances in that ballgame.
Well, it looked like Illinois had Penn State stopped on that first possession, forced a punt. That's what you want to do. But Tommy Davis dropped it, and Penn State recovered, went on down, and got those points on the board. And that's really tough to come back from that early in the game.
A sign of trouble is when you limit a team to a field goal after a mistake like that, and then you rough the kicker, and then you let them. To me, that typified what's going on with Illinois right now. They seem to be doing 2 things correctly and then 1 thing incorrectly, and the 1 thing incorrectly really kills them. So you might have a great drive going, and all of a sudden you get a blocking below the waist or a chop block or whatever. And that kind of stuff, when you're playing a game where you're basically the same as the other team in terms of level of talent, can really kill you. And I think what's happening with these guys is their confidence is so limited that when a play like that happens, they're like, oh my goodness, here we go again. Now they'll say that's not the case, but I don't believe them now. At this point, their confidence is clearly shaken. They feel like they should be 4-1 or 5-0, and they're sitting there 2-3.
Yeah, and the tangible parts of the game, intangibles, 1 tangible turnovers, another 3, 9 in the last 2 games. And maybe we in Champaign and around the Illinois program underestimated the emotion of still what happened. Illinois didn't do anything wrong going out to Penn State. They were not on campus. We've rehashed this time and again. But it sounded like the Penn State people were still upset about, especially Michael Motti, what happened last summer.
Well, I think that's right, and he had a heck of a game too, with a couple of interceptions. One that he took 99 yards and didn't score on. That'll be something he'll have to talk about for a long time. But I talked to Nathan Shieldhouse after the game about that and whether there was any extra chirping, so to speak, going on in the field about that. And he said no. He said that in the game there was not anything extra. He and Motti talked a lot during the week via text messages and such, and that good-natured stuff. But he said he's a heck of a player, had a heck of a game, and they just got outplayed.
I do think that stuff drove Penn State during the week.
Sure.
I think they practiced harder. I think got better prepared. They were focused, and I think it clearly worked in their favor during the game. I don't think the Illinois kids had any concept of it at all. I don't think it was in their heads one tiny bit. They had nothing to do with it. They didn't even go out there. So, overblown, probably not at this point.
Two other things that stood out in the game I thought the other day, guys, were one, Mason Monheim's play, 11 tackles, Big Ten Freshman of the Week. Also, Supo Sane returning with 10 tackles. And we saw a little trickery, a little halfback option or whatever from Josh Ferguson. I know fans and people like us like those kind of things. So.
Yeah, that was good to see, and you felt maybe that would spark the Illini to get back in the ball game. On the downside of that, besides the turnovers, penalties, 8 penalties, 69 yards. And some of those are, the excessive, unsportsmanlike conduct.
And ill-timed. Yeah. Ill-timed, and there's never a good time for a penalty, but they seem to hit them at the wrong time.
Yeah, timing on the penalties is really a big part of it. Turnovers, when they happen, obviously hurt at any point during the game, and Penn State wins it last week in Champaign. All right, let's go back to Matt.
Thank you, Brian. Now, over the next couple of segments, we'll take a look at the Big Ten, particularly the Leaders Division coming up next. That's next on Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football.
The Inside the Illini Weekly MVP is brought to you by Shields, Gear, Passion, Sports. Each week we pick the most valuable Illini player, and despite another lackluster defensive effort, a freshman linebacker had another breakout performance. Mason Monheim had a game-high 11 tackles to go with a forced fumble in the game against Penn State. He was named Big Ten Freshman of the Week, and his 28 tackles this season are the most among the conference's freshmen.
Welcome back. Well, the Big Ten Conference season is underway. Now, a couple of big road tests for Leaders Division teams, Ohio State at Michigan State, Wisconsin at Nebraska. Eric Harold has the highlights.
Leaders Division, Urban Meyer's undefeated Buckeyes taking on Michigan State. First drive of the game, Jordan Hull airborne into the end zone. Ohio State takes an early 7-0 lead. This game would be back and forth. They trail here, but that ends when Braxton Miller connects with Devin Smith. Easy stroll into the end zone. Ohio State goes up 17-13, and they would win this one 17-16. Their next game, a showdown later today with Nebraska. Urban Meyer talked a little bit about the atmosphere he expects to see.
I would anticipate a night game, and one of the greatest stadiums in college football will be at Inferno. Plus, you got a 5-0 football team getting ready to face another really good team. So I would anticipate it will be as electric as it's ever been.
And Inferno, meanwhile, in Nebraska, Wisconsin taking on the Huskers. Monte Ball back from an injury, and he cashes in early, 7-0. Wisconsin, more Wisconsin later as Joel Stave airs it out to Jared Abradaris. Touchdown, Badgers. They take a huge lead going into halftime, but plays like this one would do them in later. Taylor Martinez weaves his way through the defense, 2 men to beat, and he gets it done inside the pylon. Touchdown, Nebraska. They would complete the comeback, and they take out Wisconsin 30-27. Elsewhere in the Leaders Division, Indiana gets a big play from their special teams as Tevin Coleman returns a kickoff, 96 yards for a touchdown. They scored 28 points in the second half, but it was not enough to overcome a big early lead from Northwestern. They fall 44-29. Also, Purdue, they pick up their 3rd win of the year in a non-conference matchup against Marshall. Caleb Terbush leads the way with 294 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, and their defense was opportunistic. They win 51-41. And now, back to the Inside the Illini team in Savoy.
As we look at the Leaders Division, now granted it's only been one game played in Big Ten football in the conference schedule, but when you look at the top of the standings, you see Penn State and Ohio State both at 1-0, both teams that can't participate in the Big Ten title game. Obviously, things will work themselves out, but it's an interesting start.
And both with impressive wins. I mean, Penn State with a big win on the road, of course, at Illinois, lopsided in that case. Right. And then the fact that Ohio State could go to Michigan State and win there. I mean, that's just a tough environment to win. And the Buckeyes kind of gritted it out.
They can't play in the title game, but they can win the trophy. And I'm telling you, I promise Urban Meyer is talking about that trophy every day. And I'll bet you Bill O'Brien's talking about that trophy every day. But Ohio State, that's a huge crossover win, because you got to think, you're playing 3 games across the aisle. Obviously, they got Michigan later on, but they're basically 1 game up on everybody, in my opinion. And I really think they're going to win this division. In fact, they may win this division running away. And the fact that Wisconsin's already got a loss in one of their crossover games, this thing's kind of looks like Ohio State is the team to beat. Kind of hard to believe, and unfortunate they're not eligible.
Those two teams are not eligible for the title game, but they could sure play a big part in who does get there. That's for sure.
Well, that's for sure. And I mean, you still got to play them. Still going to be tough to beat in Columbus, and now in Happy Valley, you would think the way they're playing. But Urban Meyer just doesn't seem to matter wherever he goes. They just do really well.
We don't know a lot about Purdue yet. I don't think they had the bye week last week, did not play. We'll learn more about them today when they host Michigan over West Lafayette.
Kind of a dangerous game, too, for Michigan, I think. Purdue has been better since the midpoint of last year. Illinois went over there and got beat in West Lafayette. They're surprisingly better, I think, than people think, and the game is in West Lafayette. And you know this, Bob, they've pulled some shockers over the years.
Absolutely.
You know, I just pulled them out of the hat, basically.
Their defense is going to be the key. I think their offense is going to score some points, but if their defense can play well, they have a chance to beat anybody in the division.
Illinois got enough of their own problems coming off that 35-7 loss, but they got to go to Madison, which is always tough. They got to play a Wisconsin team that lost on the road in Nebraska. Obviously, they don't want to go 0-2 in the Big Ten to get started.
Well, the thing with Wisconsin, they've got an impressive run. 19 straight they've won at home at Camp Randall. They're 21-3 under Brett Bielema at Camp Randall, and they've just been remarkably very tough to beat. I think the winning streak is second to LSU as far as home winning streaks in the country.
But they got close to getting beat by some lesser teams.
Right.
So I don't completely trust their history here. They can lose to Illinois, honestly. I don't think they will. They certainly can.
They're 3-2 on the season, and one of those games against, was it Utah or Utah State?
Utah State.
Utah State missed a field goal at the end where they could have won that game, so that's another potential loss for the Badgers.
Yeah, very much so, and they have not looked pretty at times. They've had, Monty Ball's been in and out. They've changed quarterbacks. The new quarterback started a couple of games ago after Danny O'Neill started the first one. So they've been, and they didn't get a turnover. They really didn't have many turnovers on defense either early in those games.
And Wisconsin is last in the Big Ten in total offense. We'll talk more about that as we move along. Back to you, Matt.
Well, next up, we'll go a little bit more in depth on those Legends teams. We talked about Michigan State a little bit. We'll do that next on Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football.
The Inside the Illini Play of the Week is sponsored by our local Anheuser-Busch distributor, Ron Chetty Distributing. The top play from the previous week's Illinois game, and even without much of an offensive punch, the Illini pulled this one out of their hats, down 21-0 in the second half. They go with the trickery, the lateral to running back Josh Ferguson, and he hucks it to the end zone. Spencer Harris there for the touchdown. The only score, but a pretty score for the Illini.
Welcome back, talking Big Ten Legends Division now. Now, just one game into the conference season, can we start saying things are starting to take shape? We'll discuss, but first, our Eric Harold brings us the highlights from last week.
Nebraska hosting Wisconsin, and Nebraska would make mistakes early as Rex Burkhead fumbles the ball. Wisconsin recovers. They would be down early, 21-3 in the first half. Bo Pelini not happy, the crowd silent, but plays like this would get them back into the game. Taylor Martinez takes the snap, runs up the middle of the field, eludes everyone in the front seven, gets into the secondary with 2 men to beat, gets it inside the pylon for the touchdown. Nebraska coming back. More Martinez later with his arm, throws it down the middle of the field, 10-yard strike to Kyler Reed. That pulls Nebraska within a field goal, and they would complete the comeback. They win 30-27 over Wisconsin. They improve to 4-1. Their next game, a showdown with Ohio State. Head coach Urban Meyer talked a little bit about what makes Nebraska's offense dangerous.
This is a dynamic offense. The one thing when you make a mistake and it's an 8-yard gain, this one's a mistake and it's an 80-yard gain. That's the difference that I see with Nebraska's offense.
And Urban Meyer's Ohio State Buckeyes took on Michigan State. In the third quarter of this game, Andrew Maxwell rolls left, throws it to Keith Humphrey in the flat, shakes an arm tackle, hit, keeps on chugging into the end zone. Touchdown, Michigan State. They took the lead 13-10. They would carry that lead into the third quarter, but that ends here as Braxton Miller hits Devin Smith. Ohio State would win a close game, 17-16. Elsewhere in the Legends Division, Northwestern lit up Indiana to the tune of 44-29. They set a school record for total offense with 704 yards. Kane Coulter, their all-purpose weapon, contributed 292 of them, along with 4 touchdowns. Northwestern remains undefeated. Also, Iowa, they take a dominant running game and an opportunistic defense, and they take out Minnesota 31-13. That defense had 3 picks and a fumble recovery, and Mark Weissman carried the ball 21 times for 177 yards and a touchdown. Not playing last week, Michigan. Their record remains at 2-2. Their next game will be later today against Purdue. And now back to the Inside the Illini team in Savoy.
Well, the Legends division, of course, a big win for Nebraska out of that division over Wisconsin out of the Leaders division last week, but also Iowa with an impressive win over Minnesota. The Hawkeyes had struggled early this year and had been defeated by Central Michigan of all teams at home, and boom, they come back and take care of an undefeated Minnesota team.
I was a little surprised by that. Minnesota had been, as you mentioned, undefeated going into that game, and Iowa handled them rather easily in Iowa City to improve to 3-2 on the season. Minnesota, I think, is a lot better than they have been, but maybe they got a little wake-up call there, Bob.
And I don't think Iowa was as bad as they've been. They couldn't be as bad as they looked against Central Michigan. Minnesota, maybe we got exposed a little bit, tiny bit. Going to Iowa, that's a big game. Floyd of Rosedale. When you play for a pig trophy, it's a big deal, and folks in Iowa really took that game seriously.
I know you're pretty familiar, Bob, with the Nebraska program. Taylor Martinez, impressive last week.
He really was, and they were down 17, and they could have given up, and they didn't. Their fans don't let them give up, but then he had a tremendous second half, and that was a huge win for them, because if they go down 0-1 in that division, they're in big trouble, given the fact that they've got this nasty game coming up this week.
Especially with a home loss, and of course up near the top of the Legends division, undefeated at the start of the year, Northwestern, who we keep overlooking. They're in the top 25. They were last week, and they got another win against kind of a pesky Indiana team last week.
I think maybe Northwestern's bubble could be burst this week. They go to Happy Valley to take on Penn State later today. Northwestern has not been 6-0 since 1962, so we'll see how that plays out. I haven't seen who's favored in this ball game. I'd have to give the edge to Penn State. I think Penn State will beat them, but Northwestern, they certainly have what appears to be a very exciting offense.
Well, I'm going to be interested to see, Bob, what Michigan does after Denard Robinson, because he's been such a huge part of what they do when Rich Rodriguez was there, and now, of course, with Brady Hoke. But what do they do beyond him? Because the criticism has been it's a one-man show.
Yeah, they've got to come up with a plan. I think Brady will have that, because he doesn't want to have a one-man show. Nobody wants to be in the position they're in, and when Denard's not playing well, they're in huge trouble.
No, that's for sure. So, boy, a lot to talk about with the Legends division, and of course, just early on, Iowa, Minnesota, Nebraska get off to the good starts, but Michigan State again with that tough loss at home, giving one away, in that column at home to Ohio State.
Yeah, Michigan State should get that one. Well, you're not going to get it back, because once it's a loss, it's a loss. But they should get their record evened up. They go over to Bloomington to take on Indiana. They're playing for the old brass spittoon, one of those trophy games around the Big Ten.
Yeah, some of those trophy games are pretty wild.
Brass spittoon. Who came up with that? That sounds like something Lauren Tate came up with. Let's play for the brass spittoon. Why not?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of those trophy games too when they divided up the divisions and put different teams. Some of those games that maybe didn't come till the end of the year suddenly come up a little earlier in the process. So, all right, that's a look at the Legends division. A busy week of football in the Big Ten, and more to come. Let's go back to Matt.
Well, next up, our latest look at Illinois grads who've made their way to the NFL with our Noah Newman. That's next on Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football.
The Inside the Illini Gem of the Week is brought to you by Ray Eldridge Jewelry, elegance without the attitude, in Peoria and Decatur. A shiny gem from Week 6 of the high school season. Unity, a team on the outs with some of their league members. Maybe plays like this are why. The opening kickoff against St. Teresa. Micah Johnson picks it up on a bounce. Watch him break a couple of tackles, and then he turns on the Jets for a touchdown. It's our Gem of the Week.
Well, already a quarter of the way through an NFL season. You're watching Inside the Illini Big Ten College Football, but talking some pros now. Our Noah Newman takes a look at our latest installment of Illini in the pros.
Well, Matt, I tell you what, so far this season, we've had plenty of former Illini making names for themselves in the pros. One of them is a rookie, Tavon Wilson. He's off to a great start. The Patriots safety had a big game Sunday, recovered a fumble, and he also hauled in an interception. The veteran wide receiver Brandon Lloyd also had a noteworthy performance for the Patriots, reeling in his first touchdown of the season late in the fourth quarter in the team's blowout win over the Bills. Meanwhile in Detroit, Mikel LaShore got his second start with the Lions. Didn't go quite as well as his first. He managed only 26 yards on the ground, also lost this fumble. The Vikings beat the Lions 20-13. The Shore's former teammate, Corey Legit, had a big day in Kansas City. He recovered one of 3 fumbles forced by the Chargers defense in that game. Pierre Thomas, meanwhile, had a rough outing against the Packers. He picked up just 14 yards and 9 carries. That's 1.6 yards per carry. Not a great average, but he's still the team's leading rusher. He'll look to bounce back against the Chargers on Sunday night. Let's look at your Illini in the pros. Back to you guys in Savoy.
Welcome back, everybody. As we look around the NFL and how some of the Illini guys did, one name that kind of pops off the page is Tavon Wilson, defensive back with the Patriots. He had an interception, 22-yard return, a handful of tackles as well, Bob.
When the Patriots took him in the second round, basically everybody in Champaign-Urbana went, huh? But it shows you how smart the NFL people are. And Tavon Wilson has been really a star. I mean, he could be potentially an all-rookie pick. He's playing so well, and he's a great kid. He's a guy that really put the team in front of himself, which is, I'm sure, what he's doing with the Patriots. He was the guy that, remember, he was playing safety. He was happy, or he was playing one position, asked to switch to another. Happily did it, and that's what you need to be successful in the NFL. And what a great story, and congratulations to him, because he's a kid that really deserves it.
And maybe a guy that was overlooked a little bit at Illinois. I mean, he's playing in the secondary. I think a tip of the cap to Ron Zook, recruiting a lot of guys that wind up in the NFL. Look at Jeff Cumberland, who didn't do a whole lot offensively at Illinois. You knew he was talented, but just from an athletic standpoint, Coach Zook recruited a lot of guys that wind up in the NFL at whatever position.
And when you look at Tavon Wilson, it makes you want to watch the Patriots a little bit more because Brandon Lloyd is there as well. Lloyd, another solid week. He had a touchdown reception. Dave Deal with the Giants did not play because of that knee injury. And Mikel LaShore brought back down to earth perhaps in his second game, just 36 yards rushing, but he did catch 4 balls for 37 yards.
He needs to be on the kick coverage and punt coverage teams for the Lions because that's where their problems were this week.
That kind of gives us the look around the NFL and former Illini guys. About 20 are suited up on any given week and making strong contributions all the way around. Matt, we'll throw it back to you.
Hey, thank you, Steve. We'll talk on some more college football. If you want to see an explosive offense, I suggest you take a trip down to Charleston sometime this fall. The Eastern Illinois football team lighting up the scoreboard. We go inside the Panthers next on Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football. Welcome back to Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football. Here at Buffalo Wild Wings in Savoy. Eastern didn't need overtime last week to get a lopsided win over Austin Peay. We go inside the Panthers with Eastern Illinois University.
On a picture-perfect day in Charleston, Illinois, Eastern Illinois was nearly perfect and put on a show for the family weekend crowd.
Third down, about a half yard to go. Garoppolo to throw again, a lot of time, throwing deep over the middle right, got it at the 30, pulls away, 20, 10, it's a touchdown for Eastern Illinois. On Wise wide to the right, 3 wideouts go to the left. Garoppolo takes the snap, hands off up the middle, Walker bounced outside 25, 20, open room, 15, 10, 5, touchdown, Jake Walker, his 5th touchdown of the season and the 15th of his career, and the Panthers are up 13-0. So Eastern takes over after the short punt and the penalty. They held Austin Peay to 3 and out, and the Panthers have it at the 34. Garoppolo throwing the bomb on first down, deep up the left side. Keandre Gober got it, 30, 20. What a debut for Keandre Gober. A touchdown the first time he touches the ball at Eastern Illinois.
For the second week in a row, EIU scores 3 touchdowns in the first quarter. Austin Peay cut the Panthers' lead to 24-7 with 5 minutes remaining in the second quarter. EIU would score 2 more times before halftime, from 50 and 63 yards out, making all 4 EIU touchdown passes in the first half from 50 yards out or longer.
Here's Garoppolo out of the gun, looking to throw to the right. Fakes the short pass, now throws it deep up the sideline. Laura's out there, got it to the 20, 10, to the 5, dives. Is he over? Touchdown, Eastern Illinois. Here's the second down play now from the Panther 37. They empty out the backfield. Garoppolo sets up. He's throwing it deep down the middle right. Got it at the 35-30. Splits the safeties 20 to the 10 to the 5. Down to the 1-yard line. He's in. Touchdown, Eastern Illinois.
The Panthers didn't let up in the third quarter, outscoring the Governors 28-0.
First down, handoff, no fake handoff. Garoppolo on the keeper, runs it in up the middle. Touchdown, Eastern Illinois. Second and goal at the 1. Now they're in the power I. Here's a handoff up the middle. Walker, he goes in for the touchdown. Back to pass Garoppolo, throwing it deep up the right side. Gober got it. He's on his way again at the 20. 10, 5, touchdown. Keandre Gober, the freshman, his second touchdown of the day.
671 yards of total offense, 3 receivers over 100 yards, and EIU's third game in a row over 50 points, and the Panthers find themselves at 2-0 to start OVC play.
When you score that many points on offense, you need to give the offense an edge, but you still need to get better. We're not perfect. A-.
With having so many receivers that are talented that we have, and having 2 great running backs in Jake and Taylor, I mean, there's so many aspects of our offense that it's tough to plan for this offense as a defense. I mean, you can't get your scout team to reenact what we do because we do it at a different tempo that they do. And I mean, I'm excited about it. It's great to have that many weapons around me. It makes my job a lot easier.
Jimmy Garoppolo earned another OVC Player of the Week honor and received solid backing from head coach Dino Babers on the way he commanded the offense.
I really like the way he went about the game today, almost like a chess master. Sitting down there, moving his pieces and knowing what he wanted to do, and just taking pieces away from guys, and there was nothing that they could do about it. I thought he generaled the offense very, very well.
After back-to-back games at O'Brien Field, the Panthers hit the road for their first away contest in the OVC this season. EIU visits OVC rival UT Martin. The Skyhawks are coming off a tough loss to Eastern Kentucky, who, like EIU, are off to a 2-0 start in the OVC.
In the OVC, it's a tough league, so I mean, all the games are going to be tough. It's not like we overlooked Austin Peay or anything, so we're just going to take it week by week, and I mean, we'll see where we go from there.
In addition to his OVC honors, Garoppolo has been named to the Walter Payton Award watch list. EIU and UT Martin kick off at 2 o'clock today from Martin, Tennessee. The Panthers haven't won at UT Martin since 2001. The last time EIU started 3-0 in the OVC was 2006. Reporting on the Eastern Illinois Panthers for Inside the Illini, I'm Ryan Snodgrass of WEIU TV.
Up next, our Healthy Choice Pick'em, brought to you by Physicians Choice Wellness. Plus, we'll go to Facebook, answer some of your questions about Illinois football. Somebody's going to win a Buffalo Wild Wings gift card. That's next on Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football. Welcome back to Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football. I've joined the desk for our Healthy Choice Pick'em, brought to you by Physicians Choice Wellness. Give away your weight today. A quick look at our standings and a clean sweep. We all got our picks right, so sorry, Brian, you couldn't gain any ground on us. But Steve, Bob, and I have 4-1. Brian at 2-3. A bunch of great games last week. Brian, you had the West Virginia Baylor one. How much were you sweating with how much scoring was going on?
I didn't realize how, as I was finding out, I was like, are you kidding me? Is that a misprint? Is that a basketball game? What's going on here? And that's just an unbelievable score, especially not in overtime. Just a regulation game.
Yeah, it was an incredible game to watch. What we've come to expect from, I guess, both of those teams the last couple of years. But we'll start with our picks this week. I'm going to go with the big SEC battle. Number 6 South Carolina versus number 5 Georgia. A game that's going to eliminate one or the other, probably from BCS national championship contention. I've seen both teams play. I've seen Georgia the last couple of years, been really impressed, but I think what this is going to come down to, and I'm reminding myself of a 3-point game from last year, what I think this will come down to are turnovers, as they always do in these close games. And Georgia has proven themselves, while being great on both offense and defense, just a little bit more mistake prone than South Carolina. So I'm going to take Georgia losing to South Carolina, 5 losing to 6. So there you go.
Can I tell you something? Neither of those teams are playing for the national title. Just want to get that out.
Oh, there you go.
No, neither of them are playing for the national. I'm sorry to both teams, but what the heck?
I'm going to go with for the second straight week, I'm going to go with a game with Nebraska involved. And speaking of sweating it out, I was sweating that one out last week because I picked Nebraska to win at home, and Wisconsin jumped out to that early lead. Nebraska ranked 21st in Columbus against number 12 Ohio State. I think the Buckeyes will be too strong for them. I think it'll be a heck of a game, but I think Ohio State wins maybe another 1-point game. You never know how that's going to go, but I'll pick the Buckeyes in that one.
Well, I'm going to look at Washington and Oregon. The game is out in Oregon. The last 2 years, this game has been really, really close between these two teams at half, and then Oregon pulls away in the second half. And Washington's playing better. They beat Stanford. I've been impressed with that. Oregon still averages over 50 points a game each game they're out, and they're a pretty high-flying team. So I think Washington has improved, but I'm going to go with Oregon at home.
I'm going to go with the return of Catholics versus convicts. Matt, I don't know if you know that, but that's Notre Dame, Miami. And they're playing in Soldier Field. Miami, they've had some issues. Obviously, the whole deal with the strippers and all that kind of stuff. So they're still kind of in that mode, but they're not what they once were. And yet, if they win this game, they move themselves back in the top 25. but they're not going to win this game. Notre Dame is going to continue its run up the top 10, and I think they get a boost if they beat Miami. I think they're going to beat Miami in a very close game.
Should be a big one. Now, time to take to Facebook. And this week our question comes from Jared. And he asked us about the Illini being drafted. And I'm kind of springing this one on you guys since we didn't talk about it beforehand. But 2 Illini drafted in the first round. He was asking, who has the best chance of going in the first round? If you had to pick 2, who has the best chance? And I guess the secondary question is, do you think 2 will go in the first round of this coming draft?
Those are real good questions. The first name that came to mind for me was Michael Buchanan, defensive end. I think he's got that next level in him. Jonathan Brown, although he's been dinged up, I think is another guy there. Hakeem Spence, I think, would be a third. Notice I'm saying all defensive guys, and it's defense where the Illini have struggled. So who knows what their stock has done so far this year.
Yeah, I don't know if he would be drafted, but I'm guessing a Graham Posick with his size and his ability would be a guy that some teams would look at, because we've had Dave Beals and others that maybe we overlook initially. Maybe we're too close to it, somebody like that. And I think Buchanan would be the other one I can think of, just with his, maybe he needs a little more weight to be in the NFL, but he is very, very talented.
If he's healthy at the combine, Terry Hawthorne is going to blow the NFL people away, because he's tall, he's fast, he's got great athletic ability, he can do a lot of things in terms of returning. So I think Terry Hawthorne's a guy I would watch out for. He's a guy, he could be this year's Tavon Wilson. He could be a guy that you might think's a 4th or 5th rounder, climbs into the 2nd round or even late 1st round.
Yeah, all those immeasurables, the vertical and all those things that people fall in love with. I guess if we got a little time left, any other names that might surprise you that you might think might hit some of those numbers?
Nothing that jumps right out now. There's some young guys that maybe next year at this time we'll be talking about, but I don't know. I can't think of anybody that really jumps off the page in that conversation right now.
I always think back to Greg Lewis, who was a backup receiver at Illinois. Emerged a little bit his last year, but overlooked, maybe too small, had a really long career in the NFL. So you just don't know. They're looking for other stuff that we're not looking at.
Yeah, we could all be surprised. And like you said, a different year this year than last year, so it's hard to compare the draft picks. All right, coming up next, time to talk the Wisconsin game, the first of really 2 tough road games for the Illini. We'll break them down next on Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football. Welcome back to Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football, our final segment, scouting today's game. Now, not many expected the Illini to be 2-3 and really look the way they've looked this season, but also few expected Wisconsin to be 3-2 and out of the rankings by week 6. Our O'Brien Auto Park of Urbana this week looks at the Wisconsin Badgers.
It can be said for a number of Big Ten teams, Wisconsin isn't the Wisconsin we've become used to.
We're 3-2. Would we rather be 5-0? Absolutely. We could also be 1-4.
I think we're also kind of used to, kind of programmed to just kind of winning and going on. But that's not the team that we have proven ourselves to be this year.
In Champaign, there's been frustration about the production of both the offense and defense. But look at the comparisons on offense, defense, both passing and running. The Illini have been better than the Badgers in all 4 categories. Illinois has been more efficient on 3rd down, and their points per game are identical with a similar schedule strength.
You got to respect them as athletes over there, because they can make some plays, and we just got to make sure that we just play a full quarter game and stay on top of it.
Much of that on Wisconsin's side has been due to a less productive year from their far and away best player, running back Monte Ball. To be fair, his 1,900-plus yards and Heisman nomination in 2011 are difficult to improve upon. But even with Ball, the Wisconsin running game is, in terms of yards, the worst in the conference. Their passing game has relied on the arms of Danny O'Brien and Joel State. They've combined for 5 touchdowns in 5 games, 4 of those to Jared Abrederis, the only Badger with more than 9 catches. The Illini know Wisconsin is much more one-dimensional than they've been in the last couple of years, and they'll hope to key in on that dimension.
You got to make sure you load that box. I mean, that's just what it comes down to. You got to make sure you got one more than they got. And obviously that presents some different issues, because now your secondary has to be in a position to cover. So, the biggest deal for us, we got to mix it up, kind of pick our times, pick our spots, but we got to be efficient in stopping the run. I mean, you got to.
Many believe it's just a matter of time before Ball becomes the running back he was last year, and those in Champaign just hope it's not this week. But even with an advantage in these statistical categories, all the yards in the world don't account for points. And the Illini can't afford to do what they did last week, leave the red zone empty-handed in what for many will be their first trip to Camp Randall.
They obviously want to go to Indianapolis as bad as we do, so all you can do is focus on the task at hand.
You've got to move forward instead of revert back, and you got to play the next play. It's a game of football, and not every play is going to be perfect. How you respond is the key on how you're going to win.
Well, guys, as we saw just there, scouting Wisconsin a little bit, and I think if you take the names off the teams, look at the numbers, look at the strength of the schedule, you might think this game would be a whole lot closer, but I think Wisconsin, being Wisconsin and having the players that they have, a team definitely going to be favored in this one.
Well, they're definitely favored, but I don't think they're the Wisconsin of old.
Right.
They're last in the Big Ten in total offense. They're not moving the ball quite as well as they have in past years. Monte Ball, while he's having a decent year, he's getting in the end zone as he usually does. He hasn't been as dominating, I think, Brian, as we thought he would be.
No, and part of that is the offensive line. Of course, they had the firing of the offensive line coach at one point this year. They're still big. I looked it up. They're all 6'6" and about 320 pounds. So that hasn't changed. They're getting them all from Wisconsin or Minnesota. So you know what you're going to get when you play Wisconsin. It's like playing Wisconsin in basketball with Bo Ryan. You know what you're going to get. You just have to beat it.
The changes in the staff have clearly affected Wisconsin. They lose Paul Chris, they lose Dave Doran, they lose their offensive line coach, as you mentioned. I think that's been a big deal, probably overlooked, and everybody kind of assumed Brett Bielema would pull it all together. He's done a decent job of it, but once you get on that negative roll, then kids start looking for reasons that things aren't going right, and they say, hey, we don't have Paul Chris anymore. That's a real problem.
And you talk about the losses on the staff, you also have to talk about the loss at quarterback. Losing Russell Wilson, and Wisconsin's been pretty weak offensively when it comes to the passing game. 5 touchdowns from 2 different quarterbacks. That tells me they're trying to find their identity, and they haven't yet in the passing game. So I think a lot of people are isolating Monte Ball, and that's hurt them so far.
That's a good point. And when you look at the Badgers and the way things have gone for them so far, the defense still. These are 2 average defensive teams when you look at the Big Ten stats. Neither one is great, so maybe that's going to make it a tight game, a low-scoring game perhaps, because neither one of the offenses are so good either. One thing Illinois is doing offensively, Coach Beckman talked about it, both the co-coordinators talked about it, they're cutting back the playbook a little bit this week. They're going back to basics, so they say, and maybe dumbing it down. I'm not sure that's the right word or not.
Wishbone? Or
I don't think that would be
single wing.
I don't think that would be less confusing, but they are trying to pare it down a little bit.
Yeah. Well, the big thing is if you're playing this game in Champaign or in Madison, wherever, Illinois has got to cut down on turnovers. They've had 9 in the last 2 games. It's just really killed them. And you go into Madison, I mean, the margin for error is so small for Illinois in this game going up there that they've got to protect the football.
And the history of this series, Illinois takes leads early, and then for whatever reason, Wisconsin rallies. This seems to happen in Madison and in Champaign. It happened last year, happened a couple years ago, and there's no real reason for it, other than I think the kids in Wisconsin were always maybe a little bit stronger, a little bit better prepared. I think this year, if Illinois gets a big early lead, which I don't think will happen, I think they hold on.
Call it the Camp Randall factor or something like that.
Well, in last year's game in Champaign, of the last 6 games down the stretch in the regular season, Illinois lost. This was a game they actually played well in. They had the lead at half. They scored 17 points in the second quarter. Now, Monte Ball had over 200 yards rushing, and Wisconsin came back and won. But this was a game where Illinois against Wisconsin where they had a shot to win the game.
And we talked about it a little bit last week. Illinois seems to do maybe a little bit better against the one-dimensional team when that defense can focus on one thing. Do you think this matchup is good for them? They focus on Monte Ball. They know that's what they need to do.
Yeah, we kind of thought that last week when Penn State came in after seeing those spread offenses that put up a lot of points, and Penn State ended up putting up a lot of points as well. Illinois has not won at Camp Randall Stadium since 2002. Haven't played there since 2008, so it's a new adventure for all these guys.
Yeah, it has been a while since they were up there. In fact, I think Zach Becker caught a touchdown pass from Juice Williams the last time they were up there in 2008. It's been that long.
Wisconsin can throw the ball a little bit better than you think if the quarterback's playing well. And that's kind of a hit and miss deal for them. One thing you need to know about between the 3rd and 4th quarter, the building's going to shake. You're not experiencing the New Madrid fault. It's nothing. It's nothing crazy. Wisconsin. It's the students. It's one of the coolest things in the Big Ten. A great tradition.
And I think a lot of the players, even Illini players, are excited about just that atmosphere and getting to play in front of that kind of crowd. And Wisconsin, obviously, a team that's been to the Rose Bowl a couple of years in a row. So should be an interesting game. Should be a fun one to watch. Well, thanks for watching Inside the Illini Big Ten college football games at 2:35. Be sure to watch highlights on NBC at 6 and 10. Have a good afternoon.
Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football is brought to you by your local Anheuser-Busch distributors. Ray Eldridge Jewelry, elegance without the attitude. Peoria and Decatur. Physician's Choice Wellness, give away your weight today. And Buffalo Wild Wings, Mattoon, Champaign, Savoy.